and welcome to Who Review, Mini Who Review, where this week on our YouTube channel we are reviewing the first of the three Doctor Who Anniversary 60th specials. We're starting with the Star Beast. We're going to do all three of these, and then at some point maybe we'll stick it up as a podcast of its own.
Yeah.
On our Nothing But Static feed. But for anyone who's paying attention and wants them to hear our thoughts as we go, available to people via YouTube, the magic of YouTube. So hello YouTube, and if you're listening to this in the future via the Nothing But Static podcast, where were you?
Yeah, fucking hell, guys! It's been on YouTube for ages.
Yeah.
Come on, then.
Unless for weeks.
You're not really unless you're not really bothered about it, and you thought, oh well, I'll check it out to support the guys, and we've immediately told you to fuck off. In which case, come back. We love you.
I'm sticking with my original statement. I'm not backtracking.
Nah, fair enough.
Fuck you guys. I'm kidding. So Star Beast. It's the first non-Chibnall led episode of Doctor Who since when did Series 10? Whatever year Series 10 came out, which feels like 1,000 million years ago now.
Yeah, a while ago.
Wow. So the first thing to touch upon, I think, with this is very quickly general audience perception, because I found this really interesting. So I've talked a lot about how Chibnall's era wasn't particularly liked, not just amongst hardcore fans, but also just the casual audiences, and I get rebuffed on that point quite a lot. But in the UK, we have a thing called the Audience Appreciation Index, or the AI score, Appreciation Index score, and it's a thing the BBC do specifically to get a gauge of how much the audience are enjoying the content they're doing. Because they're government funded, they need a good sense of that. So I believe they do this themselves. And apologies if I've misunderstood or I'm misremembering how it works. So they have a certain number of people they survey after each show from the general public, the casual audience more likely than not, and get their opinion. When you plot the average scores for every Doctor Who series onto a chart, everything non-Chibnall was averaging from 82 to 88. All of Chibnall's 3 seasons are the lowest rated seasons of the show in public perception, with scores from 76 to 81. So I think that's really telling that it's not just fans being picky about their show, with why that era of the show wasn't particularly popular. I don't think it resonated with casual audiences either, and we talked about this a lot, and we probably won't go into it too much, but I think a lot of it comes down to like connection to the characters, particularly the companions. Lack of characterization for them really did, even if the stories were good, it meant just the casual audiences didn't feel very invested. That's my perception of it anyway. But to put this straight on the scale, Chris, for casual audiences, this got an 84 point something. I don't have the point something in front of me, but that would put it, if those are the averages, that will put it somewhere around the popularity of season 2 or season 7, which had, I think, between them 84 and 86. So, which is like the 5th and 6th most popular seasons the show has ever had. So in terms of the audience, Star Beast went down a treat. Ratings were good. Was it 5 million? Which is better than the sort of 3 million we got for the previous episode, the big centenary special last year. So that's a big jump up. That's the David Tennant effect. So the question then becomes,
and that's the overnights as well. So that figure's going to go up at some point
massively,
when the full,
yes,
the full. It'll go.
Yeah, once we get the 7 day like iPlayer data and all that stuff. Yeah, it's just the general overnight figure. It was the second most watched show of the evening, next to just behind Strictly, which nothing beats Strictly in the UK. That's just the way it works. Strictly Come Dancing. It's a reality show, game show where they celebrities dance. I guess they call it Dancing with the Stars in the US. I think that's their version. Our version of that is deeply popular.
Well, it's deeply popular, but also it has an audience demographic that watches TV live more than a drama would. I think the fact that it's behind Strictly is really expected. The fact that it beat I'm a Celebrity, which is also an incredibly popular show, is brilliant. Like that's a real reflection of and I think it was the biggest drama launch of the year. And one of the most watched shows across the whole weekend. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, really good ratings. And I think it's also looking like it's done very well in across Disney Plus. There's been word that it's been sort of between fourth and second most countries. Sort of an average of sort of third, like the third most watched thing on Disney Plus the last few weeks, which is really good. I mean, it doesn't have a huge amount of competition right now because Loki has ended. So it's I don't really know what its competition.
Santa Claus is. Tim Allen's making a second Santa Claus series, Dan, and that's out.
That's true. I don't think that made a huge splash last year, though, either. So I'm not sure that's competition, so to speak. I'd wonder if it would still be, second or third in the ratings on Disney Plus if it was coming out against a Loki or a big Marvel or Star Wars show of that ilk.
Yeah,
maybe
the things that seem to be beating it at the moment in countries are holiday movies. I think both Home Alone movies, for example, were above it in America. I think so. The sort of thing you'd expect for this time of year.
Yeah. Agreed. As I'm now actually recording this from Australia, I'm in a hotel in Australia. I can tell you as well, having pulled up Disney Plus, they really they're promoting it. It was the first thing that showed up on a big banner at the top. Doctor Who Special 1, big bit of artwork with Beep the Meep and all the other characters from the show. Obviously, our main character, Beep the Meep, and then some other guys, some skinny guy in a suit and this redheaded lady showed up as well. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Beat the Meep show. So let's now bring it to us, Chris, and our perceptions, because I always think it's really important. Because with Doctor Who, I think because of what happened with Chibnall's era and the reaction to it, and the fact that often critics of his era are dismissed as being picky fans, I want to make it very clear that casual audiences seem to have reacted very positively to this, where they had not to Chibnall's, because I think that will frame more conversation going forward. I think it's really important to establish that.
I think it's also clear key because I think for big fans it can be easy to get distracted by the particularly loud voices and assume they're the majority voices, because the loud voices are complaining about some obvious things that they were always going to complain about. And a lot of that critique is insane. But I think it's easy to go, oh, look what's happening here. People are saying this, and it's like, actually, that's not what the majority of people are saying. It really isn't.
Yes.
And I think it's important for things like AI to show that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think obviously the usual suspects are going to go on about how it's woke. And again, I'd encourage those people to watch this little show called Doctor Who from sort of the 60s onwards, and just see how they feel about it. Because I think it's always the woke was already in the building. So I'm going to tell those people. Doctor Who is quote unquote been progressive since day one. Same with Star Trek. I'm sorry to tell you.
Not only is it progressive, but it's just I mean, look, we might get to it, but equally I don't want to spend too much time on it. But it's just. It's
but I do think because I do think that there is a line. Okay, so the people who just dismiss something because it has a political message or because it's being inclusive, those people can just go fuck themselves and they're not worth debating, they're not worth engaging with. But I do think sometimes there are episodes of this very show that have gone too far in being like, humanity's fucking the world up, wink wink, sort of thing, that you go, well, that's actually now distracting, because while the message is good, you're actually hurting yourself by the way you're delivering this. You've gone too far in terms of you've broken the reality of the story for me by basically looking down the camera lens and telling me the point instead of just letting the story speak for itself.
Which literally happened in a Chibnall episode.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, but and it happens elsewhere. I mean, we literally watched a COVID era drama, with the Jodie Comer one. I always forget what it was called. Help, maybe. I had the same problem for me. Had the same problem for me, where it was like, I agree with your message, but I don't like this delivery. So there is a point. I think there can be a criticism had about a show being too laboured on a political point or a point on that, on that spectrum. But I just think like mostly. But it's just those idiots getting angry because there's people on television that they don't look like them, that they don't like. That is what it usually comes down to.
The amount of time, like the so many reviews like that said things like about Shirley, Ruth Mandelay's character, and said things like, and then she's in a wheelchair because of course she has to be. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What difference does it make? What's the big deal that the character's in a wheelchair? And how dare you say, because of course she has to be in a wheelchair, because there are 60 fucking years of this show, and how many characters can you point to and go, they had a disability? What the fuck is your argument against representation when the show is 60 years old and the majority of characters, like you say, look like you or function like you? What possible fucking thing could you have against there being a character in a wheelchair? It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
It's really weird. And she was a fun character, and I think we'll get to it. So yeah, that's great. Let's start breaking down the actual episode, because I think we'll lose too much time to this stuff, and I do think that while there is an argument someone could make to the show, maybe labouring the point a bit too harshly, we'll maybe swing back to whether we felt this did that. Let's just talk about it more generally. So, how are you feeling in general about the Star Beast, Chris? Did you liked it? Didn't like it? Where? Because obviously, we're coming off an era that both you and I, full disclosure to listeners, did not care for, right? And I think even in the height of Russell's era, there were elements of Russell's writing that irked us. I think we're on record of covering some of these. But Russell back, excited again for the first time in a while. Would have been very easy for this to be a disappointment, I think, because we were quite excited. How are you feeling, having seen the episode now?
Yeah, and like Dan says, I think I make excuses for a lot of stuff I didn't like in Russell's era, a lot of stuff I didn't like in Moffat's, and stuff I didn't like in Chibnall's, until Flux was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I was like, this isn't even coherent. This is just, episode 1 of Flux is a collection of scenes with the promise of, like, at some point we'll tie this all together. Well,
yeah, we even like on the first episode of Flux, this could potentially be something. Because there's lots of interesting ideas here. Yeah. Let's let it play out, because we knew it was serialized. Yeah. So I even remember giving the first episode of Flux a sort of semi-positive review in that, hey, let's benefit of the doubt. Let's assume this is all coming together in a coherent way. This could be something. I didn't hate it. We'll see where it goes. And where it went was absolutely nowhere. And did it pay off any of those ideas? Yeah. Absolutely not.
It's coherent for one, which I know sounds stupid, but I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that there was, there was a start, a middle, and an end, and it all felt coherent. I thought it was great. I thought there were things there were flaws, I would say. I think we're going to go straight into spoilers for the purpose of reviewing these. We'll go straight into spoilers. So spoilers now. Go step back and watch it. I recommend you watch it. So does Dan.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the episode. I think on the whole, I came out positive. There are definitely criticisms to be flung at the episode, but none that I think will overwhelm the good, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely a big recommend.
I thought the overall tone was great. I thought the humour was good. I thought the lightness of touch was fantastic. I thought some of the scenes between the Doctor and Donna were beautifully acted and beautifully written. I thought their chemistry is undeniable. I really liked the characterisation of 14. David Tennant looks like he's obviously having a great time. And as Dan said, this is Dan's point. He felt like 10, but with the experience of 11, 12, and 13, which I thought was a really lovely touch.
And a lot of that,
sorry,
I think,
10,
was
11,
I think a lot of that was in his performance as well. I think I don't think a huge amount of that was in the script. There were a couple of moments where, like when he says that he loves Donna and she was like his best friend or whatever, I was like, oh, that feels a bit like 13 in the writing. But I think a lot of it was just Tennant like informing the character with really subtle performance changes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He felt older, not just in appearance, but also just in performance. I thought there were a lot of great, moments. Sylvia going to attack the Doctor, the exchange about Wilf being looked after by Kate, and the whole "I loved that man" scene. Any scene, really, to be honest with you, with Sylvia and Sean, like her husband, I thought he was fantastic, and I do think you only get. I think actually you get away with that character a lot through the performance. He's so charming and likable and affable that you get away with the fact that, for example, you can trust your wife. I trust my wife, but we don't see even the beginning of the scene where shit gets explained to Sean. Sylvia knows everything. By the time Rose has had the meta-crisis experience, she knows everything. Sean doesn't Sean just being like, yeah, but not him. And it plays as a funny moment. But I think in the hands of a lesser actor, you are in that moment going, hold on, have you not got fucking questions, mate? And I think that's do
you even know who the Doctor is at this point? Has anyone sat you down and told you what the fuck is going on? Because the last time I knew, you knew nothing.
Yeah, and let's I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so I think they obviously, hug, reunite. Meep gets parachuted out, and then there's the scene outside. So just at the end of the hugging scene, have Sean look at Donna and go, "Can someone fill me in as to what's going on here?"
Yeah.
And then you just slam cut, and you just then assume he's been told. So I thought
I think we can assume when it happened, with the information that we have, but the episode not at all bothered with pointing it out.
Yeah, and there's some tightness in general with the end, and I know you've got some strong views on a particular element of the ending, so I'll let you talk more about that. But I think there's some tightening at the end that perhaps felt it needed almost another 5 minutes or something to just give the ending a bit of breathing space. There are other elements of that, which, like I say, I know Dan feels strongly on, so I'll let him speak about that. I thought the little touches, like the use of the Sonic, I enjoyed it being a tool to see graphics and stuff, and analyze the spaceship. I didn't love the shield. That felt almost a step too far, and it was cool. And I actually after 60 years, I know the Sonic's not been around for 60 years itself, but after 60 years, still doing cool shit with the Sonic, I thought was great. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, because
I didn't love the shields.
I love the shield personally. I think because of anything, for me, it harks back to who the Doctor is. There's a really, really brilliant, impassioned speech from Stephen Moffat about why the Doctor is the hero you sort of need in the world now. It's someone who won't use a gun, but instead has a screwdriver, to fix things. And what did they give him? They gave him 2 hearts. It's this really beautiful analogy, and the idea that the Doctor doesn't attack the enemy, but instead protects his loved ones with a shield. That characterization of the Doctor is amazing. And I think the other fun idea that's sort of developed without being said is that when the sonic screwdriver first showed up, it was simply that. It undid screws. That's the first thing we ever saw it do. And over the years, it's clear that the Doctor has basically added to the device, changed what the device does, added features constantly, to the point, although he calls it a sonic screwdriver now, it's not really what it is anymore. It's basically his iPhone. It's his Swiss Army knife of tech, because he knows he has a lot of tech that he has to potentially interact with. So he's got a device that he's fiddled with enough now that it works with all sorts of stuff and does all sorts of things. It's a sort of omni tool, It's the Doctor's version of a Swiss Army knife, and the idea that every time it gets blown up and comes back in a new form, it has a new feature or two is great. There's a point earlier in the episode where he draws a screen in the air with it, and then he can go through data. Love that. Very very futuristic. You know, you can
I
imagine
love that. Yeah.
you can imagine him visiting a planet with that technology, stealing a chip and sticking it in his sonic screwdriver so it can do that. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't go outside of the realms of possibility, and it gives the thing more uses, and it doesn't change the heart of the character to me, which is like, it's not about fighting the enemy. It's about protecting his loved ones and the innocent people of any planet, you know. And yeah, of course, the Doctor's only tool at his disposal in a fight is a thing that makes a shield. It's fucking perfect. Like, I loved that. Very slow to use, so it's very limited as well. I love that it very clearly took him ages to set up, which means that you're not going to have that thing in the future of just like, why didn't you just whip out a shield? You know, he didn't just click his fingers and a shield was there. It took him time. He had to really like draw it and create it, and he had the time to do that because the enemy was fighting itself, essentially. You know, there were two factions having a fight with each other. They weren't coming for him. So it's this perfect... to me, it was like a perfect balance of like a thing he could do that's not going to... You're not going to... In all future episodes now, you're not going to be like, well, S.H.I.E.L.D. would have solved that. You know, because it was a slow process making those shields, and he's not always going to have the time to do it. So yeah, I was a fan, but I do understand the criticism. It's like, you know, how many more things do you add to the sonic screwdriver before it becomes like silly, you know? But it also felt like it fitted right in with whatever technology allowed him to draw that screen. So I was kind of like, it also felt like they hadn't. I didn't feel like they'd added two things. It felt like they'd added one thing that had two functions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm conscious I've talked a lot, so I will pass to you and then maybe get what you liked and then give some stuff that I was less keen on. But I loved the way they dealt. I didn't want them to ignore. I thought it was a really interesting. It was going to be a really interesting balance with Rose. I didn't want them to kind of ignore the transgender of it all, the non-binary of it all, and you know, those nuances between the two. Apologies, because I think by the end I'm aware that there's kind of two different things, and by the end it would appear she's non-binary. So apologies if I'm getting any of that wrong. But it's, you know, obviously if it can be hard to you know, I want to learn, basically, is what I'm saying. So if I'm getting any of the phrasing wrong, I apologise. But I thought, you know, the conversation that in particular Sylvia and Donna had, I thought was brilliant. The line. Sorry, I didn't finish that thought. I thought they had to, you know, that line of I wanted them to kind of tackle that and talk about that because I think it's important for representation. But equally, I didn't want. I guess I still wanted a Doctor Who action. Do you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily, antagonising. Deliberately antagonising is a good way of putting it. I didn't want. I'm all for upsetting people that have a problem with that because I think it's fucking ridiculous to have a problem with that. I think it's a ridiculous thing to have a problem with representation, and I think it's so important to tell these stories. But I didn't want, you know, an hour of it to really just feel like it was, you know, antagonising too much. I guess I'm not really explaining that well, but I thought the balance of the Rose storyline was brilliant. I thought the conversation between Sylvia and Donna in particular was fantastic. I thought it was so sweet and endearing. I thought it felt so real, and again was kind of, I guess that's what I mean with the balance and stuff. You know, we know these characters. We know that, you know, you watch some shows like Goosebumps recently, for example, had a trans actor, and that wasn't part of the story. That wasn't pointed to. Same with Saved by the Bell. At least in series 1, that didn't particularly become a story, but that is right for some shows because again, that is representation and that is, you know, breaking down those barriers. But I think given that we know these characters, it felt like Sylvia would sort of be struggling with that because that is a common thing for, you know, people in her age range and situation, you know, and I think representing that and Donna's reply of, well, does she look beautiful? Yeah, then it's fine then. I thought was fantastic. I loved that scene. I also loved, and this is, you know, it's been particularly contentious with some parts of the fandom, I fucking loved asking Meep, Rose saying to the doctor, "Oh, you're assuming gender," and the doctor's reaction of, "Oh yeah, I am. You're right. What, Meep? What is your gender?" I was like, "Oh, fuck yeah, chef's kiss," because again, it's that. The pronoun debate has become such a fucking stupid. Oh well, if I want to be called a cat, I'm going to be called a cat, and it's like that's not the point. So fed up with people saying that, and you just want to go. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in an outfit? Have you ever put an outfit on and gone, "Oh, I'm not sure I like this. I'm not sure it fits quite right." Imagine if that was your fucking body. Imagine if that was your whole identity, and you felt that way about it. And I'm not demeaning it by that comparison. I'm trying to frame it in a way that would make some people, potentially see it. And I'm not trying to, it's such a delicate subject, and I don't want to seem like I'm undermining it by bringing up the outfit thing, but I'm just trying to make the point that, like, if someone feels they're in the wrong body, if someone feels they're in the wrong gender, that's such a huge, daunting thing. And so for them, and I'm also aware I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but for people in that position, normalizing pronouns, because if I can make someone's day just a little bit easier by saying she instead of he, and not making them recoil when they're called something that they don't feel they are, not make them react so emotionally or emotively when they hear that and get that reminder that they feel they're the wrong gender. Like, if we can resolve that by simply calling them what they want to be called, which seems to me to be a fairly fucking basic human right.
Well, it's what we afford people when it comes to their names. Like
Exactly.
I know people people will say sometimes to me, "Oh, do you prefer Daniel? Do you prefer Dan?" And I'm like, I'm actually personally not bothered. But the fact they're asking that, and then they'll use. If I had a preference, they would probably use it. If I said, "Oh no, I go by Daniel," they would use that, and no one would be like, "Oh, political." Making me use you. No, they would just human courtesy. I'll call you what you wish to be called, and I think it's the same with pronouns. I think what I liked about the use of it in the show was quite simply how casually it was brought up and thrown away. That's what really worked, I thought. It was just such a quick, simple, easy... Oh, yeah, you're right. I'll check. Which is right.
Which is my point. The key thing, and the reason I contextualised the pronouns thing, is because I'm with you. That's what I loved so much about that scene. It's the fact that the doctor's... It's almost not so much the questioning. It's the doctor's reaction of, "Oh, yeah, I should do that." Normalizing something which unfortunately has become contentious, which unfortunately has become stupid in the way it's talked about sometimes. Normalizing it and going, "Oh yeah, no, well, we should be doing this," and it is as simple as going, "Oh yeah, of course, what is your pronoun?" That just helps make people go, "Oh, it doesn't seem like a big deal." Like I've seen that on 10 shows now. You know what? That makes sense to do. And then you could really, really fucking help someone, and you could really make a difference in their lives by not making a big deal out of it and doing what the doctor did. Oh yeah, no, you're right. What is your pronoun? Like, I thought that scene was so important for that reason, for potentially going some way to normalizing that conversation for the people that need it normalized. I talked a lot there. What are some of your positives, Dan? And then we'll get into critiques.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I think just in terms of like doing 3 episodes in this format, I think the tone of this one, the approach to this one, it was kind of perfect. Like, make it a fun, rompy, sort of classic Russell T Davies era style story. I think doing that first is sort of why I always sort of, to some degree, defend Force Awakens. Like, Force Awakens was like a palate cleansing. Like, this is just baseline what the tone of this thing can be, and now we've reestablished our baseline. Now we can go play in the sandbox and do some more interesting stuff. I think when you've had an era that's tried something else and succeeded or failed, at a certain point you always need to, regardless of whether the Chris Chibnall era was a big success or a failure, whether it was good or bad, if you've had a long period of the show feeling different, doing a baseline sort of thing to sort of reestablish what the show is at its most simplistic. Boiled down, not experimental first, before you then go and do something experimental, which it sounds like we're about to get from what everyone under the sun that knows anything about Wild Blue Yonder next week's episode has said. They've all implied it's a very unusual episode of Doctor Who, and something really different, and that's very exciting. But what I loved about Star Beast was it was just like, and we're home. Like this was the glass of water between wine tastings to cleanse the palate, so to speak. So it was a really great, fun, straightforward Russell T Davies style Doctor Who episode to sort of bring us back to that era. Had a really simple plot. It had really great characterization of the normal people being affected by it. We talked already about Sylvia and Donna's husband, Sean? Yeah, that's his name.
I think it's Sean, although as I said Sean, I was like, is it Sean?
Sean Temple?
Yeah.
That's his name, right? Sean Temple, Doctor Who.
That sounds right.
Yeah, Sean
I'm
Temple.
sure it is.
Great. Having the way they're characterized and involved in the episode is just such a brilliant Russell magic as well, of just like you end up caring so much about the people that like the consequences of whatever the alien plot are feel bigger, right? The idea that someone like Sean or Sylvia could be at risk if this plan plays out is brilliant. And then of course there's the actual plot itself, the meep of it all. I think it's a really great plot that has enough intrigue and enough twists and turns to engage an audience while not being so complicated and overwhelming that they don't have time to do that character stuff. It's like a really nice balance in the Star Beast for me, because you are intrigued what's going on with Meep, but it doesn't overshadow the Doctor meeting Donna again and introducing Rose, who's a really important character, I think. And I will say very quickly on your point, I didn't have a moment to, and I should really make sure I say on that as well. There's two ways to handle a trans character in a show. One way is just to go, that is, they are the gender they have selected, and we will not be addressing it further than that, because we're accepting them the way you should be accepting them. The other way to do it is to tell a story about that too. That's also an acceptable way to do it, because there are experiences that can be shared. And I think the moment that really, I think, will go down, I think, really well, because I think some kids will see this and learn, is the moment when Rose was being misgendered, dead named by the school sort of bullies from back when she was at school. Is she still at school? It's hard to... I couldn't quite tell what the age was supposed to be. I guess she's still at school. It's weird, because Yasmin Finney is like 20, I think. So, Yasmin Finney...
Yeah, I think she's meant to be 15 and still at school, I think.
Yasmin Finney looks amazing, but Yasmin Finney does not look like they're still at school.
No.
That's the point I want to make. Yeah, she's definitely not. So it's that thing. It's not quite as bad as like a Spider-Man movie when you've got adult Tobey Maguire chasing after a school bus and you're scratching your head as to why an adult man is chasing children. But it is a bit strange, because I think they've cast a little older than they maybe should have with that. But anyway, besides the point, I don't want to distract too much. But my point is, having the moment was so good for this story, because it really characterized the toughness of Rose, but also Donna and Sylvia with their reactions. Like Donna's like, "I'll burn the world down for you," or whatever she says, just something like that. It's incredible how much affection you gain for Donna in that moment, but also what a lesson to be taught to any kid that's in school right now watching Doctor Who, seeing the hurt that can cause in the performance that we had from Yasmin Finney, who I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think was a little hit and miss, and I hate the fact that that's true. I thought in those moments, the pain expressed in Yasmin's face was beautiful and heartbreaking, and everything it needed to be for the scene. But there were a couple of, like, when it got to a bit more exposition-y scenes, when Yasmin's delivery on some of the dialogue, particularly some of the techno-babble towards the end, a little bit stilted, but, nothing I would say would ruin the episode for anyone. Maybe just warming up into the role. I know that Yasmin's character, Rose, will be back for Nshuti's era, so I'm not criticizing that, because I just think, whatever. Like, that's... they'll warm up into the role, I think. But on the whole, I thought that was a really great choice. I loved the Beep twist. I know it's from the comic, but it worked really well here. Miriam Margolyes was amazing in that role. We already talked about it, but Tennant's characterization of this new version of the character was fascinating to watch interact with anyone, whether it was Unit, whether it was Sylvia, whether it was whatever, all brilliant stuff. And I thought the stakes were really smart. My biggest compliment for this episode, for me, is the way they built into a sort of mini version of the Wilf scenario from The End of Time, where he basically had to give up Donna to save the world. Now, in the end, that didn't play out for a really smart story idea, which we'll talk about. But the basic premise of the end of this episode is the Doctor is in a room where he can stop the bad guy's plan, but the room divides in half. He's on one half, Donna's on the other, and he can't press all the buttons he needs to. But he also doesn't have the time to explain to Donna what she can press. So the only way to save the world, or to save London in this case, like a 9-mile radius, I think they say, which is most of London, from being destroyed and turned into a crater, is to give Donna her memories back, which will kill her. And the human side of that dilemma, tied straight into our big sci-fi plot, was genius. Absolutely genius. And like really top tier Russell bringing all of his plots together moment, and then the solution to that was equally sublime, which is, of course, they said it back in Journey's End or whatever episode that was, was one mind can't contain all that. But how about two? Rose has now had Rose exists, Donna has had a daughter, and they can share that load. I cannot tell you how much that made me happy and how satisfying that was as a reveal. They then fucked it up with a criticism we'll come to. I think they made a mistake following that, but that's we'll come back to that. But that moment of it worked really well, and I loved it.
Did you guess slightly? Because for me, the teddy bear that the Meep was holding, the red one in particular, I went, that looks like the monster from The Runaway Bride. Like, that was slightly ticking in my head because of that. I didn't know if you clocked that or not. Because obviously they did a really clever thing of revealing monsters that could be but weren't necessarily, and then they didn't have, Meep wasn't holding the Ood teddy, which was really obviously the Ood or the Cyberman one, and then they cut to them after. Oh, and by the way, because I've seen a little bit of like, well, Donna didn't meet the Cybermen, she could have met the Cybermen off screen. Like, that's fine. That's really fine.
Absolutely, who cares? So I didn't pick it up from the teddies. I didn't pick up that the red one looked like the Ragnos. Is it the Ragnos, the Ragnos Queen from Runaway Bride? I did, however, figure it out before it came up because of the name. Because I think in a world where the story didn't address that this was a trans actor in the story itself, and they were just Rose, and it was it was unclear whether this is someone who had transitioned or not, and it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't have had the same question. But when someone transitions, they get to choose their new name. So I knew this character had chosen the name Rose, not had the name chosen for them. So that was my hint as to that Donna had passed on some of that. I didn't know it would be the solution necessarily to the problem, spreading it across two. I didn't quite parse it out far enough to get to that point. But yeah, I kind of sussed it out. I was on my way to that answer before the show got to it. That it had been passed down to some degree because of the naming thing. Because otherwise, it doesn't really make sense as a name to choose. I thought it was really genius. So in terms of positives, look, this was a really funny episode with some brilliant practical effects. I mean, the Meep looks amazing. The story was a really smart, simple, fun Doctor Who romp. We got a chance to explore all of the character stuff that we wanted from this. and we haven't even gotten to it yet. And then we revealed possibly my favorite ever TARDIS set, like the most incredible, spectacular,
fantastic
TARDIS set. I cannot wait for this to be in use for multiple seasons and become iconic. I mean, prior to now, one of my favorite TARDIS sets was Matt Smith's. This is beating that, I think. It's so beautiful and so clean, but it's also so malleable. The ability to, like, I can already see, end of Shooty's first season, the big epic thing that's gone horribly wrong, and the cloister bell rings in the TARDIS, and as it rings, it flashes red. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Oh, that's great.
I cannot wait for
it's
that.
So good.
I'm very excited.
And the running around. And I've really loved, the way Donna goes, "It's fabulous," and he jumps. Like, that was a real, we got some good Dr. Donna, and I mean, the character Dr. Donna stuff. That, for that moment, felt like the best friends of Series 4 hanging out and having a moment. And I loved that.
Yeah. And that brilliant shot of him running along the new walkways, giving us not just the sense of the scale of it, but the interconnected sort of almost like MC Escher, like sort of weird connected walkways that go off to mysterious places sort of thing, which is just a really very Doctor Who thing to do with that set. It's an incredible set. So big thumbs up to Bad Wolf and the production, because Beep the Meep looks amazing. It's a practical effect with a CGI sort of adjustments to the face, which is like my favorite way to do creatures, I think, is to do an on-set creature and then enhance with CGI rather than making it fully CG, because then you don't have the right weight. And the same with the villains, not the villains, the other aliens whose name I keep forgetting. Another really brilliant practical effect, the big bug monster guys. Looks amazing.
The Wharf Warriors, or whatever they were called.
Yeah, and then of course they really blew up a house set. The focus on practical effects in this really makes a difference. So it looked great. It sounded great. The Murray Gold's music was glorious. There's so much to love about this episode. I only have a couple of complaints, really.
Well, just could I interject with just the on the Murray Gold point?
Yes. Yeah. I'm slightly laughing because I wonder if you're gonna. There's a point I wasn't sure I'd even bother making, but I wonder if you're about to make it, because there was one thing that I thought kind of mildly bothered me. But let's see what you're going to say. I'm curious.
Well, I just in general, when I'm just trying to get up his name. Hold on. What's the name of the? Because I thought the last composer actually was one element of Chibnall's era that I'd have been intrigued for them to keep. Akinola, yeah. So I thought Akinola's music the music of Chibnall's era was stunning, and I would have loved to have seen Akinola take on Russell T Davies, and it's more of a future proofing thing in terms of the Murray Gold, in that I loved the nostalgia of it, and I loved the nostalgia of Russell's writing. But I would love for Shooty's era, because, this is a 60th anniversary special, and David and Catherine are back. So it's going to, like you say, feels like coming home, feels like watching, feels like we've literally, you could jump straight from Journey's End or End of Time to this, and it would work. And that's great for this. But I hope the Shooty years, I hope the music maybe feels a bit different, and I hope that Russell's writing, in a way, I hope it feels like the writer of 1 to 4 of Doctor Who writing Doctor Who, and that's brilliant. I love that, and if we get that for Shooty 2, fab, also great. But I'd fucking love to see what the writer of Years and Years and In It's a Sin does with Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean? And that evolution I would like to feel, and I think with Murray Gold, I love Murray Gold's music, I really do. But things like I Am the Doctor, very much a theme I associate with Matt Smith running through one of the scenes, and it's that's great. So I'd love that piece. It's probably my favourite.
I don't think it was quite I Am the Doctor. That's the thing I wanted to bring up. It's sort of a new piece of music that just sounds so much like I Am the Doctor that you go, oh, I hope you have new ideas, mate, because this is so close to something you've previously done that it basically comes under, you'd have trouble copywriting this new piece of music.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's like I say, that is great. But I just think that's the thing. Like you say, you want new ideas, and I think there were moments where I'm like, oh God, I'd love to know how this feels with the music of a different composer. I'd love to know what that does to it, and it could be negative. It could feel jarring. It could be like, oh well, it kind of feels like it used to be, but not quite. Like, and you know, it could be a bad thing. But I'm slightly reserving judgment on how I'm going to feel about Murray moving forward. That is a kind of future-proofing thing. I do think for the specials, like you say, you want it to feel like home. But Akinola, I think Akinola and Russell's writing would have been a fascinating combination, and I do think it's a shame we didn't get that.
I would agree. So to move on to the negatives, so there's a couple of things I didn't care for. Literally, the intro was fucking horrible. Everything before the title sequence,
horrendous,
go in the absolute bin. It looked awful. It was poorly written. It didn't need to be there. It felt really clearly. I mean, they must have. To be fair, they shot stuff with Catherine Tate, so like not in front of a green screen, like on the sets. So they clearly filmed this at the same time. So I don't think it was a last-minute addition. I think it was planned based on that.
I'm still not convinced on that.
Well, yeah, but they filmed it with her on the set. Like, it's her on the set doing the lines, like, you know, to camera. So it must have been filmed around the time of the production. But it's so bad. It feels like it was tacked on 10 minutes before release. The fucking green screen on Tenet. Jesus, I don't even know what to say.
I'm fine with that exact scene if it's just Donna sort of stood waiting in the shop, and it's a voiceover instead of spoken, and it's you know, David Tennant on Jodie's TARDIS or just stood outside the TARDIS staring into space. Like, I'm fine with it as an idea, and I understand that, you know, for Disney Plus people it was arguably important. I've got nothing wrong with a recap. There's nothing wrong with a recap, but the way they did the recap was appalling.
Yeah, it was absolutely dreadful. Because the bigger problem, I think, was that, like, it's information you get from the rest of the episode anyway, and in a more natural, more sort of clear way. There's really no need for it. That's the worst part. It not only is it bad, it's needless. If the rest of the episode didn't cover that stuff, I'd be like, well, I didn't care for it, but it wasn't for me, and I'd probably shrug it off. But the real crime of it, for me at least, was the needlessness of it. So yeah, dreadful, absolutely dreadful. That should go in the bin. The other thing then, and my other big criticism, and this is such a Russell thing to do, and it did give me flashbacks to like Journey's End and overcomplicated answers to things that don't need them. And I'm probably going to get some criticism for this, I think, because I don't think everyone's going to agree with me. But I did not care for the solution to getting rid of the Time Lord spirit energy or whatever it is that was in Donna and Rose. This whole idea of it's something a male presenting Time Lord. I think the sentence is something like something a male presenting Time Lord will never understand, and it's like the ability to just let it go. Now I know what they're getting at, right? They're making it, but it's really so okay. When we talked about the political elements of the rest of this episode, they always told us something about the characters or the story we were experiencing. Right? That point has nothing to do with anything and comes completely out of left field to me, to my mind. Because I think what they're implying is the idea that the struggles that, you know, women still go through, obviously people who are trans going through, and we see that in this episode, they have to learn to let it go, right? And that's a skill they can apply to the science fiction premise of having the Time Lord energy to release, right? And the idea, I think, and I would love to hear more of Russell's thoughts on this. Like, I hope he gets a chance to talk about this moment at some point in an interview. I haven't seen or heard anything from him yet on it. But the problem, I think, for me is it's well, again, we're talking about needless. It's needless in that we've already explained that the Time Lord stuff was spread across the two. And once it activated, you could just have the tenant say, well, once it activated across two of you, it dissipated. So you're slowly going to lose your Time Lordiness now, because you've released it essentially by spreading it across two people and having it active at the same time. That would have been enough. That would have been more than enough. There was no need to do this in this way.
Even because I think it's whilst that Dr. Donna scene where they were the Dr. Donna was fun, I don't think it's sustainable for all 3 episodes. So I'm fine with them getting rid of it right away.
Yeah,
but
me
even
too.
if it was just, oh, now there's 2 of us, we can converge our energies and push it out, like something like that, whatever. Like,
well, or even just, like I said, even just having that thing of like, now it's spread across 2 of you, it will just dissipate. It's just gone. It's just gone. Like, give it an hour, you guys will be back to normal. Like that would have been it. That's fine. This idea of like, we can let it go. The problem, I think, is it undermines Journey's End. To me. Because if the idea is, and again, I understand what the point, or at least to my mind, what I got, and again, I would love to hear us talk about this because maybe I've misread it. I'll put that out there as a possibility. But if the idea is people from these groups are so attacked so constantly, they've learnt to let it go. And they can apply that ability to let things go to the science fiction premise. Why couldn't Donna do that originally? If Donna was as smart as a Time Lord, but had the experiences of a woman in Journey's End, which is what she was, categorically, she should have known then how to resolve the problem.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could argue against it. At that point, you could say, oh well, it's about the fact that it was spread across 2 people that also.
But the episode doesn't say that. The episode you'd be fans.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
The episode doesn't clarify that. Based on the text of this episode and that line of dialogue, those 2 lines of dialogue, you could be. The only conclusion you can draw is that she likely or always had the power to do that and never did, and I just think like that's madness because, yeah.
I had a similar thing where I had an issue where I'm like, you could argue it multiple ways, but I've seen, because I was like, is this just me? And I ended up on like a Reddit thread, and it's definitely not just me that had this interpretation and feels this way, but equally there are people that are like, well, no, it could just be this, who didn't feel it. But my similar thing to that, and I agree with you on the let it go thing, but my similar thing with that was the notion, to me, the dialogue about Rose being neither male or female because the Doctor is, neither male or female, and and the whole kind of binary stuff. For me, whilst I liked that stuff and thought it was clever, I personally didn't like any interpretation where you could go, well, the reason Rose is non-binary is because of the meta crisis and because of the Doctor's influence. Now, like I say, I've seen people on Reddit go, well, no, I like to think that she was just non-binary anyway, and that's what I would prefer to think. But I think you could look at the text and go, well, that piece of dialogue suggests that the reason Rose is non-binary is because of the meta-crisis influence. And I don't like the fact, personally, that you can get that read from it. I would much rather...
I think somebody could definitely read that Rose's sort of gender identity came from the meta crisis, and even the desire to have transitioned being related to that. You could absolutely draw a line from A to B, and I do agree with you. Actually, that is a problem. I like the idea of it, and it's a moment of glory, right? It's a moment of inclusion. That's the notion, but it's just that tiny bit of thought needs to be put into, and this was always one of those things, Russell, where he would just go big idea over the logic every time, and sometimes he got away with it. And sometimes he didn't, and that was always.
It's not even for me. Yeah, and it's not. It's not even a logic thing. It's a. I just think Rose's identity should be Rose's identity, and it should be her choice. And I don't like the notion that someone who feels negatively about this stuff would be able to go, well, she's only that way because of the meta crisis and the Doctor. No, I don't like that at all. She should be her for being her. She should be her because it's her choice and because it's, she's fabulous. I just didn't like being able to connect those dots personally. Yeah.
No, I 100%,
I
100% agree with that. I think if you know, and look, it's easily dismissible. I think as just in my head canon, that will not be the case because the show doesn't confirm either way. But the criticism will remain of that is definitely a read you can have of it, which is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the episode in general, I think towards the end, like I said, give it another 10 minutes maybe, and it's just all a bit cleaner. I think a lot of that stuff maybe.
Do you feel the ending's a bit rushed?
Tidied up. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, from the point where the Dr. Donna exists and stuff, and like I'm fine with all of that, but I feel like I say, some of the Sean stuff. In a way, some of the the way Sylvia, and it almost felt. And by the way, we've not said this, and I think it's important to, because she's kind of the other new character. Ruth Mandalay as Shirley is brilliant, and the Shirley character is fantastic. And again,
I hope she. I just want to add. I hope she's back. I hope that's not her only appearance. That's how much I like that character. I cannot wait to see more of her.
And another brilliant example of fantastic representation. Don't make me the problem. That line of dialogue where she's like, "Don't make me the problem. Just go up the stairs and deal with it." Mwah! Chef's kiss. Fantastic.
Yeah, really good.
But you had her go. You had her say, "There's one word for you, Doctor, and it's jammy." And we talk about this a lot. It felt a little bit like the script knows that there's some issues here, and it just felt a little bit like, well, if we have a character acknowledge that, well, no, the situation shouldn't be jammy. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be a combination of luck. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that line of dialogue implies itself that the end is a bit rushed.
Yeah, I mean, I took it to mean like he was almost very lucky that when he got divided from the other side of the console, the other person happened to be someone who could do what Donna did. Like, there's one person in the world that he could have imparted that knowledge to. Two, I suppose, actually, yeah, that was Rose. But, other than Donna and Rose, literally any other human being on the other side of that room, and London is a crater. So I interpreted it as that, personally. And I feel like the pacing stuff really doesn't actually hit until after that for me, because I was like, the ending is as quick as the ending needs to be. Once Donna has Doctor powers, well, she just has to press all the right buttons, and that was always going to take 10 seconds, right? But then it's like, suddenly Meep has been shot up into space, and then suddenly we're back, and Meep is being taken off to be put in prison, and there's like that ominous line that then gets glossed over about the boss, and then we're outside with Sean and Sylvia, and it's, well, we're going to go on one last journey, and then Donna spilled the coffee. It's that stuff to me that's where it's rushed. When Ruth Medley's character, who's the character name I keep forgetting,
Shirley.
Yeah. When she says jammy, that comes pretty much straight after Dr. Donna solved the problem. And at that point, I wasn't really feeling the pacing issues. For me, the pacing issues start from there and go through the last 3 or 4 minutes of the episode. So for me, if I was going to add time by maybe cutting out that first minute or so of the intro, I would stick it right at the end to give some more breathing room to the conversation. Because I don't even...
Yeah, that's fair.
Because the conversation... When I rewatched it yet this morning, and the conversation between the Doctor and Sylvia around Donna getting in the TARDIS is confusing. Like, it's muddled. Because at first, they might be talking about going off on one last adventure, but then they shifted going to see Wilf, but Sylvia's still reacting like they're about to go off on an adventure. And it's not very clear what everyone's position in the scene is, to be honest. And that needed a few extra lines of dialogue.
Yeah, I think Donna doesn't want to go on an adventure because she's got Rose, and that's her adventure, which is exactly what we said, or at least I think I said, and you agreed. Mm-hmm. When we talked about some potential rumours for what happens next, I was like, I just want Donna to not continue the adventure because she's got a daughter now. Like, I think that would be lovely. So that sort of happens. But then then they decide to go see Wilf, which she does want to do. I think the confusing thing is it's like, and the muddledness is, to not get Rose on the story, Donna's line is, well, you can't go in there because something will go wrong. And you go, well, if you feel that way, that's also a danger for you.
Yeah,
you shouldn't do this either.
Yeah, it's all just, I don't know. That scene's a bit muddled and quick. So yeah, from everything from me, from the Doctor and Donna solving the problem to them in the new TARDIS set, everything between there just needs a few more lines of dialogue to breathe to make it feel right. That's what felt a bit rushed to me, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, I think on the whole, I mean, what a wonderful return for Doctor Who. Like, certainly one of the best episodes since Moffat's era.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd say so.
there's a couple of standouts from Chibnall's. Like Rosa is still a really great episode within Chibnall's era. I know a lot of people like
Nikola Tesla or whatever that episode.
Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, which is probably one of the better ones. And there's the Via Villa Dali episode, I think it's called. That one's pretty good. That's the one with the lone Cyberman in the sort of spooky house. That's a pretty good one.
I really like It Takes You Away, the one that ends with the frog.
Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah, these are like the 4 or 5 like episodes from Chibnall's era that I think still will stand the test of time. I think, but that is a really low hit rate considering the number of episodes produced during his era. But with those handful of standouts, it really is nice to just feel like to be excited about Doctor Who again, and to be like in a position where I can be reasonably confident week to week we're likely gonna get a good episode. It felt like during Chibnall's era it was like a 10% chance of being a good one based on the ratio of good ones to not good ones. Here I feel in much safer hands.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this episode has demonstrated exactly why. Criticisms aside, not criticisms aside, I think the qualities outweigh the criticisms in this episode to lead to a net positive. I think this is a really good episode, and I don't think the criticisms are to be necessarily ignored and not said or invalid. I think they do exist. It's not a perfect episode of Doctor Who, but I think it did a really good job doing what it was trying to do. It executed the ideas really well on the whole, and I found it really compelling, and I was very excited to watch it a second time. I will say the BBC need to do something about whatever's going on with these behind-the-scenes docs, because I didn't realise that there was also a separate 15-minute YouTube behind-the-scenes documentary besides Unleashed that had completely different footage in it, including footage of the table read and Bernard Cribbins. What the fuck are you playing at, BBC? Put that in Unleashed. Why is that not in Unleashed?
Even, and I need to check it out properly, but even the podcast seemed to be different in audio format and in video format. Jesus. But I need to check that. I might be wrong there, but they certainly I clicked on the video and they seemed to be talking to Davis earlier than they were in the audio version. So yeah, we'll see.
And I know there's a commentary as well, which I'm excited to check out. I've not checked that out yet, but like really 10 points for just like going all out with the content. It's really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode. Obviously, as little as we know about it, that makes me excited. We know they're going to end up somewhere mysterious, and we know the TARDIS is going to abandon them. We've known that from like one of the trailers from a few months back, and they're basically going to be stuck without the TARDIS in a strange place with a threat, sort of bottle episode style. Cool. Yes, please. I mean, yeah. I'll take it.
Very excited by that.
Sounds great. So yeah, thanks everyone for sticking with us. This ended up being a lot longer than we anticipated, but I think we've made that mistake before, and we will make it again, because we always get really excited to talk about Doctor Who, and that is generally what ends up happening. I say we didn't during the Chibnall era, but we tried. But yeah, thoughts below, listeners. We would love to hear from you guys about how you felt with the new episode, particularly if anyone felt some of the same criticisms we did, because again, I would never imply that this was they were above, the episode was above criticism, but I still think on the whole really, really, really good stuff, and I'm deeply excited for what comes next. So yeah, maybe, but hopefully next week we don't come back with like, oh no, it's starting to go wrong.
I don't think we will. I think next week's is going to be I think there's a very good chance
Next week is the standout.
Next week's will be the best. Yeah, next week's will be the best one.
It is positioning itself to accidentally be the Waters of Mars of these specials, I think. The least tied into the overall story,
but also it has an advantage.
The one that's free enough to be the spookiest and the most interesting on its own merit. I agree.
Yeah,
I think that's likely.
It doesn't have the weight of having to reintroduce or re-say goodbye. So I think it has all the advantages.
Yeah, because the first episode has to reintroduce Tennant and Donna and set up the situation. The third one is going to have to mostly resolve that situation and explain why that face came back and cover all of that. The middle one is really the only one of these three that's free to just be a fun adventure with those characters. So I actually really do think, I strongly feel that there's a good chance this ends up being my favourite of the three. But we'll see. Give me Waters of Mars, give me Midnight, give me Russell just at his wildest, like being spooky. Yes, please. That's what I want. I want that. I want that very much. So yeah, come back hopefully in a week, and we'll have another version of this where you can hear if that is how we felt about it once it all was said and done. I hope so.
Yeah, there we go. For the YouTube edit, I guess I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
There you go. Don't usually do that on Ramblelogs. Oh well.
Well, I don't even. Is this a ramble log? So because we usually do a goodbye after that. So it's like I've been Chris Billingham, I've been Dan Doolan, and that's been everything for this week on whatever this thing is. But we didn't even do that.
Sorry.
We just said names. So what do we do?
Well, I guess a bit different then.
All right, let's do it again. So I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time for another Who Review mini-sode.